Before we begin, viewer discretion is strongly advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This is the verbatim federal courtroom testimony of the Sean Diddy Combs trial, as reported by Inner City Press.
Baby, sit down. Because Wendy Williams just walked into court and flipped the entire industry on its head. In a moment nobody saw coming. Wendy, the original queen of tea, the woman they tried to cancel, humiliate, erase, just walked into a federal courtroom with a stack of receipts and enough ammo to make the whole entertainment world shake. This wasn't a segment on her old show. This wasn't gossip. This was Wendy under oath in front of a federal jury, calling out names like Diddy, Jay-Z, and yes, Oprah. And the things she said, baby, they could dismantle the entire music industry like a game of Jenga, pooled at the foundation. When Wendy stepped into that courtroom, it wasn't a celebrity showing up to make headlines. It felt like a woman who had been buried alive and clawed her way back just to speak her truth. You could feel it. She was there for war. The courtroom went dead silent as she adjusted the mic, and in that low, deliberate Wendy Williams voice, she said, "I was never messy. I was never bitter. I was never lying. I was early." And then she dropped the first grenade. She came for Diddy first, hard. When I first started talking about Diddy, I wasn't trying to tear him down. I was trying to wake people up. Sis pulled out a whole stack of printouts, radio transcripts, emails, timelines, deals that suddenly vanished. This was an opinion, this was evidence. She took it all the way back to the early 2000s and said, he was protected. Everybody knew it. You couldn't mention Puff without your phone ringing an hour later. She told stories about being warned. You're doing too much, Wendy. You're gonna get hurt. And then it got darker. She said she was chased out of her own radio station by a girl group after she said on air they were broke, and within hours they were waiting outside her building. That's not a coincidence. That's coordination. Wendy said every time she talked about Diddy, his parties, his abuse, his shady ways with artists, her world started crumbling. Sponsors pulled out, deals disappeared, but she refused to back down. You can blackball me, you can threaten me, but you cannot erase me, and now I'm under oath. So I hope they're listening. Then she swiveled her sights directly at Jay-Z. Wendy said, you can't talk about Diddy's abuse without talking about the people who stood beside him. And Jay-Z was one of them. She brought out lyrics he allegedly wrote for her. Ain't no nump like the one I got. No one can me better. Yes, she read that in open court. You tell me, Wendy said, why was a grown man writing that for a child? She exposed how Jay-Z was allegedly picking Foxy up from school, showering her with gifts, paying for her glam. This wasn't a label signing, this was grooming. And just when everyone thought she was done, she said there was a tape, a rumored tape involving Jay-Z, Foxy Brown, and Jamie Foxx. But then Foxy's house was mysteriously burglarized, and the tape? Gone. Coincidence? I think not. Wendy said she got fired from her top-rated radio show after she started raising questions about Jay-Z and underage girls. They called me toxic. But now you're seeing that everything I asked was worth asking. When they asked if she had proof, she said hell yes. She had emails, call logs, messages from producers who bailed the moment she brought up Jay-Z's name. They turned me into the villain just for asking what any decent person would ask. Then she dropped the next bomb. I was the first to say it. Those weren't parties, they were operations. She was talking about the freakoffs, the now infamous gatherings that are center to the federal indictment against Diddy. Wendy said she first heard about them back in the NDAs. Phones taken at the door, NDAs signed, escorts rooms, cameras, candles. This wasn't a house party, it was a ritual. She referenced Karine Superhead Steffens, who once told her on air that Diddy invited her to one of those parties and asked her to involve men. Wendy said she aired that interview again and again because what Superhead described was too dark to ignore. Drugs, paranoia, sexual setups, fear. She testified that she'd spoken to 3 people who claimed IV bags were being used at these parties to help people recover. Medical assistants were on standby, Wendy said. This wasn't socializing, this was organized depravity. She painted the picture for the jury, fans pressed to the glass of her studio, her intern panicking, her boyfriend waiting in a car outside. It was intimidation, period. She then laid out how she was blacklisted from BET, denied media passes, and had PR firms cut ties. She pulled out printed emails from firms that used to book bad boy talent, all of them cutting her off. One read, per client instruction, we will no longer be booking talent on Wendy Williams' show. Wendy held up the paper. It's my Sean Combs. And then came one of the most heartbreaking parts. I wasn't the first to be blackballed, but I was one of the few who stayed loud about it. She looked at the jury, voice firm. If you speak, you lose everything. Your mic, your money, your name. But I didn't fold. I talked through the silence, and here I am. And then Wendy dropped another bombshell. We come from a very homosexual era of hip-hop, she said, quoting her own past words. She made it clear she wasn't being shady, she was being honest. And for that, she was burned at the stake. She said back in the early 2000s, the industry worked overtime to silence anyone who asked questions. She even said she and Charlemagne knew there were certain topics they weren't allowed to touch if they wanted to keep their jobs. She brought up her 2004 book, The Wendy Williams Experience. It was full of coded warnings, veiled truths. People called it gossip. But now the government calls it evidence. She recalled an interview with Mark Curry in 2009, a former bad boy artist who wrote the book Dancing with the Devil. He called Diddy the shadow that ruins people, Wendy said, and I agreed. Then that interview mysteriously disappeared from the station's archives. She said the second she tried to spotlight truth tellers like Superhead, Gene Deal, and Jaguar Wright, she got emails, threats, and even FCC complaints. And then came a revelation that made the courtroom freeze. There was a list, she said, not written down, but everyone knew it. A list of people you couldn't talk about. And when I broke that rule, I paid. She said her segments were constantly being flagged, that show producers were being threatened, that executives told her behind closed doors, "You're going to mess this up for all of us." And now it's all messed up anyway because the truth is out. And then, as if the courtroom hadn't heard enough bombs, Wendy dropped the final nuclear truth. You think this is just about Diddy? You're wrong. This is about the ecosystem that protected him. And then she called out names the courtroom never expected to hear. Tyler Perry, Oprah Winfrey. You read that right. She said, there's a list in Hollywood, not one you'll ever see, not one you'll ever hold, but it's real. It's the list of people you do not cross, and if you do, you disappear. She exposed how Tyler Perry and Oprah allegedly moved behind the scenes to blacklist her. After her fallout with the Precious film team, a project both Perry and Oprah backed, her invites dried up. One executive told me, Oprah's people don't want you near her anymore. That's power. And that power was used to protect people like Diddy. Then came one of the most devastating betrayals Wendy described. She said she once confided in Oprah privately about her own abuse trauma. Oprah said she respected her, said she'd never exploit that pain. And what happened next? Her abuser was featured on Oprah's show while Wendy was being blackballed. That wasn't just betrayal, that was retaliation. She said Oprah, Perry, Jay-Z, they all smiled in photos with Diddy while people like her were being crushed for speaking out. And then Wendy held up the smoking gun. An email accidentally forwarded to her by a PR firm that repped both Tyler Perry's studio and a bad boy brand. The subject line, Managing Optics, Wendy Puff Tyler. But that was all she needed. They're not isolated stars, they're a machine that feeds on silence and destroys anyone who dares pull the curtain back. And girl, the curtain wasn't just pulled, it was yanked off the stage. As if the courtroom hadn't already been blown to pieces, Wendy wasn't even done yet. What she did next, she reached down, pulled out a thick-ass folder, and laid it on the stand like it was a brick of dynamite. This, she said, tapping it slowly, is a collection of NDA email threads and internal memos that were never supposed to see the light of day. And no, she didn't hack anybody. She made that clear. These came straight from people inside the industry, people who were done, who were tired, who had watched too many women disappear and too many truths get labeled as gossip. Wendy cracked open the file and started reading. First up, a 2007 NDA. The name was blacked out, but the wording, chilling. Subject agrees not to disclose any private gatherings, recordings, or interactions with Sean Combs, his guests, or associates. Violation of this agreement may result in financial penalties and public retaliation. Public retaliation. Wendy slapped the paper on the desk. You hear that? That's how deep it went. They didn't just buy silence, they bought control. Next. An email from a luxury hotel chain. We have prepared the presidential suite with all requested amenities, including extra linens, candlelight lighting, and discretion measures. Mr. Combs' assistant will arrive for setup prior to guest entry. The date on that email, 2015. Cassie was still with him. Cleaned up. Then she went deeper. She revealed receipts for payments. Real money going to bloggers, talent managers, even publicists to manage the narrative. She read out one email from a PR rep instructing a journalist to bury bury a rumor story and instead run an article on Diddy's charity work. Total image laundering. And then came the photo that stopped everyone cold. Diddy, Tyler Perry, a top crisis PR consultant, standing together at a 2019 gala, all smiling. Wendy were smiling, Wendy said. Smiling while women were being paid to shut up and others were being destroyed for not signing. She dropped the mic again when she revealed, I was offered an NDA too. Here it came to Wendy freaking Williams and offered her a syndicated TV deal if she agreed to move on, to drop the topics she was covering, to go silent. And guess what she said? I said no. And I paid the price. The jury sat there dead silent. Wendy's voice didn't shake, didn't falter. She wasn't breaking. She was blazing through the lies. The silence they bought, it cost others their freedom, their peace, their truth. And now it's unraveling, one NDA at a time. And as she neared the end of her testimony, Wendy turned dead serious. No performance, no sarcasm, no drama, just the weight of 20 damn years of knowing the truth while the world looked the other way. You see Diddy on trial, she said, calm and controlled. But I see something much bigger. She gestured to the defense table. You see one man, but behind him is a legacy of silence, a tower built on fear, on NDAs, on party invitations, on billion-dollar handshakes. Then she locked eyes with the jury, and every time someone tried to speak, that tower crushed them. She told them that this wasn't just about Diddy, this was about the ones who sat beside him. Jay-Z, Tyler Perry, Oprah. They shook his hand, they took his checks, and they made sure anyone who asked questions was pushed out the door. And then she closed with the kind of line that only Wendy could deliver. I was called bitter. I was called crazy, but I was right. And I'd rather be right in hell than be silent in heaven. She turned to look at Diddy. And y'all? He sat there, stone cold, not a word, not a twitch, not even a blink. Wendy didn't flinch. You thought I was gone. You thought your power was enough, but now you sit where the truth finally caught up to you. And I hope it's loud. And with that, she stood up, adjusted her mic, looked once more at the gallery. This trial is not the end, it's the beginning. The beginning of people finally naming names, of the walls cracking, of the whole damn tower one day falling down. And then she walked out.